Hello everyone, my name is Zim Ahmadi, peminat muzik tegar budak baru belajar. On another episode of Nota Nada, we're going to talk about Lust's debut album, Tekesima. Lust is a psychedelic pop group who released an EP called Chimichanga back in 2016, and it was a smorgasbord of sounds and influences. You have like the more desert rock-esque psychedelia of Aberdeen. You have, more trippy Animal Collective vibes in songs like Amphibia. You also have a tribute to Talking Heads, Psycho Killer with the song Psycho Killer, but it ends with an AH, which talks about their influence from the no-wave movement and the post-punk movement as well, which Lust adopts very frequently in a lot of their music. With Tekesima, they found a more solid direction, and it's not a smorgasbord anymore. So let's talk about the overview of this album. With the release of Tekesima, you see all of Lust's genres and influences come together in a more coherent, stretched, and curated manner. They have their own identity now as opposed to Chimichanga, and I like that the production is, tighter and more purposeful. Tekesima features the vocals of Shuhusna, who is the lead singer of the shoegazing band Shuna, and also R&B singer-songwriter Sasha Ninkan. And I love that these vocals add more volume to the atmosphere of this album. Tekesima also features the drummer Omar Aiman from Jack Fuzz Beats, another alternative rock band in Malaysia, and I think his drums really add something to the production as well. Tekesima as a word in Malay actually means being affected by something emotionally in a very strong manner, but also can mean literally losing your mind, right? But it's spelled differently on the album art because the original word actually has the letter R in it, like Tekesima, but now it's meant to look like a Japanese word. But it's reflective of what the songs in this album are about. They're about extremes of emotions. They're about what it means to live in the modern world with all of these emotions all together. Besides the title, Amir Johari's art direction in this album is also brilliant. It's like a Renaissance painting, almost like Caravaggio, like with a light and dark contrast to it. That's meant to look like a two-dimensional scenery, but actually has objects in it that pops out, right? And rightly so, because the objects in this album art, I think, has its own story, and if the singles are any indicator, the single itself is reflected in the objects. For example, You I Adore is reflected by the bloody mask. So maybe each of these objects represents different songs in the album. Who knows, right? I also love that the album art features the band members speaking through the shelf, overlooking this old guy who's working on something. It's kind of like Goonies, where you have, this group of kids coming to like a haunted house and then, spotting this crazy old man trying to figure out what on earth he's doing here. So I love that vibe from it. So the sound overall has that bouncy excitement, kind of like Old Foals, but you also have a less wacky version of bands like Off Montreal. It's a museum of strong emotions. It's curated way more than Chimichanga ever was. But the question is, do these tracks stand out by themselves, or do they help to elevate the album as a whole? Let's go on and dig deeper in the tracks by track. The album starts out with an introductory cut called For You I Will, and it's an unabashed romantic declaration. I think it's definitely a mood setter, with percolating clips of people talking, and it's kind of surreal because it's like, it gives this atmosphere of lovers from across the world, across different times, and that theme sort of continues to He Said, She Said, which is the next track. And in Tekesima, Lust doesn't really follow a conventional song structure. I mean, not a conventional pop structure at least. There isn't really a strong hook or a strong verse-chorus-verse format. They sort of follow the format of plays more, which is like it's separated into acts. Like each song has 2 acts or 3 acts with different sounds or arrangements to it, sometimes drastically different. For example, in songs like Good to Know or in Like the Back of a Spoon, heck, the whole album is structured this way. Another thing that's evident within these tracks is the lyricism to me, because sometimes I'm unsure as to how to interpret the song because they are very layered and metaphorical or sometimes absurdist to me. Like some of them are very openly postmodern and ridiculous. Like it's meant to sound like a stream of consciousness kind of thing, where instead of a person telling a story, it's a telling of many stories, like billboard slogans weaving in and out of your head. Continuing the legacy of like songwriters, I think, of like Patti Smith, for example, or even David Byrne, like, or Julian Casablancas and the Strokes during the early days, or even with his band The Voids. Or if you want a Malaysian example, Iqbal M also has that whole stream of consciousness kind of thing, where he's not usually the first person in the narration. He's teller of many different messages in one song at once, and they follow that. Some of the tracks are obviously metaphorical. For example, the track Desire features lyrics like, I chased the flame but left my dignities. Like, that sort of lyric is definitely metaphorical, but other times it's very postmodern and crazy. Already in comparison to their previous EP, Tekesima shows that it leans on much brighter sounds, like the song He Said, She Said. It sounds like a mining march sound, you know, it's chat-worthy and uplifting. And every time I hear this track, I see a montage of lovers throughout history, like what I said in For You I Will. Like, it's supposed to be an audio representation of love in its different forms. And it also sounds like an ironic celebration of, you know, people marching to oblivion, especially with that refrain, down in the pits we go, over and over again. It's very fun. It's a very fun track. I love how in the song He Said, She Said, you also have like them exploring deeper into what love means. Like sometimes, you know, love is affected by internal forces or hesitation in lyrics like rip a page and write it down, I will hate, you know, as opposed to love. Or external forces in lyrics like hear the holy people say, no, oh, no, no. Like, the song also gets more and more manic till it reaches this top rap segment of this where it gets more and more anxious, and I love that. Like, it starts off with this happy marching thing, but then it gets crazier. Then there's Like the Back of a Spoon. Like, musically, it's not very interesting, but I love the guitar tones in the solo at the end of this song. It's another cynical, apocalyptic kind of song where, you know, you have lyrics like holding hands as part of a demand, to be one, to be whole, to be left in a hole, to be bent, later snapped, to be soon torn apart. This song also features one of my favorite lines in the album where, you know, the singer goes, send my wishes to New York City, whatever it means in your head. Like, the band is like letting go of all interpretation that they might have in the song and letting the listeners interpret however they want. But it's also maybe a depiction of love itself and, you know, how uncertain it can be. In this song, Like the Back of a Spoon, it's also an epitome of, I think, one of the best things about Lust is the vocal performances, is that even though sometimes it sounds jolly and drowned in the mix, it's presented and performed in a very vaudeville, showman level kind of charisma. Like, you know, the lead singer is presenting this story to you on stage with his, you know, fancy suit and stuff. So it's really cool stuff. At the Back of a Spoon is a good example of that. The next track, Q Mama, has one of the catchiest riffs in the album. It has less twists and turns than the other tracks. It's not as dramatic of a roller coaster, but it's still very memorable to me. And the word Q Mama boggles my mind. Searched it up. It could be a restaurant in West Java, Indonesia, or it could be the Portuguese proverb "Que mama castigo," which means spare the rod, spoil the child, right? I.e., if you don't hit your child, they'll become brats. And I don't know, Luz could get inspiration from any of these words, and, you know, even if "Que mama" is spelled differently from the Portuguese proverb, "Que mama castigo," they did that with the word Tekesima, so it could mean something else entirely. Anyway, this song has one of the more absurd imageries in this album. Like, there's a chubby kid riding a donkey, there's a mention of the Pope, there's birds singing dirty songs. It's a Dali painting almost. It's very weird, and I think it's meant to be like that. It's meant to be evocative of different visuals as opposed to here's a story for you to listen to. Since it was released earlier this year as a single, Desire is one of my favorite tracks from Lust, and it still is one of my favorite tracks. It's anthemic, it's uplifting in a weird way. It's just really good. I just love that refrain that they go, you know, that they say whenever they sing, throw another brick at your desire. It sounds like an anti-establishment kind of slogan, which is really, you know, riveting to me. Like, whenever I listen to Desire, I think of like music documentaries. You know, like when people make documentaries about a certain genre or subculture, like you watch a documentary on grunge, you'll definitely hear Nirvana playing Smells Like Teen Spirit. You watch a documentary on 1977 punk. In the West, you definitely hear like Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, and Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones. Like, Desire feels like that. Like, it's an anthem for music in Malaysia now, and also the modern world filled with distractions and things to gratify you, but not much comfort or a sense of belonging amidst all of these different stimuli. And Desire reflects that so well. And it's just one of those simpler songs in the album. It's very straightforward, not as crazy instrumentally, but definitely one of the best tracks I've heard about so far this year, especially from the band Lust. You I Adore, which is another single that was released, is a wonderful declaration of love. I like the melancholic passages, very trippy. I love the backing vocals by Shu Husna and Sasha Ninkan, which adds a kind of dark gravitas to it. And the song does get darker. The band itself describes the song as about longing for the unattainable unknown. And you sort of feel that not just through the lyrics, but through the sound as well. That it's about, being impatient for love, and you feel like making a savior out of anyone who's willing to give you any attention. 21st Century Spy is another favorite of mine in this album. It's a post-punk revival song. It sounds like it's a tribute to The Strokes, especially the Come Down Machine era, with that jangly, bright riffs and syncopated kind of rhythm to it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't think they're ripping it off. I think they're doing the sound justice, right? With the vocal mixing and the guitars as well. I love that, they touch upon the subject matter of, dystopia and social isolation here. You find it in lyrics like, who in this age has time to listen to another mind? This song continues that theme of desire, like with social and ideological bubbles created by modern technology, how are we supposed to maneuver that? There's also the other lyrics that reflect that, which is, who in this age has time to listen to another's mind? Who in this time of age to be allowed to speak their minds? It's a remark on how obsessive we've become of people who are famous in social media, and the sensationalism that surrounds it that makes us sacrifice who we are and our true persona, for the sake of fame. We have lyrics as evocative as maybe once a week brand yourself a cheater, and also one of my favorites, life is not a bitch lest you give it way too many reasons to be one. And all of this tells you pretty straightforwardly what the song is about, and it delivers it really well with that bright riff. Despite the fact that majority of Tekesima is not psychedelic anymore, as opposed to what they did with Chimichanga, you can still find that psychedelic root in the song Espionage. It's very bubbly and trippy with a lot of phasers, production in there. And it's cool. I mean, it's a refreshing break from the other tracks in the album. It doesn't really distract you in the production, but by itself, I think it shows that the Lust is still able to carry out that psychedelic sound, even if it's not part of the album. They can still do it if they want to. You get that sort of punky talking head kind of vibe to it. It's like a tug of war between weird post-punk and also like more psychedelic 70s funk vibe, like MGMT Congratulations era. And I don't really have a coherent interpretation of this song, but the song mentions Twitter, and they're pretty on the nose about it, and kind of reflects that feeling of drowning really well. And when you drown yourself in too many applications or too many social bubbles, that feeling of overwhelmingness, I think, translates really well through psychedelia. It's manic enough, and Espionage really carries it through. In the song Good to Know, you venture into another romantic serenade, such as in You I Adore and He Said, She Said. I love the two lines of this song that I'll definitely sing if I see them performing live, I was alone, I was in love. And I love how they combine these two contradictory emotions together in such a candid outburst of feelings. I just love how it comes out, right? And as a single, when the song first came out as a single, it was very polarizing, at least between me and my videographer, because he doesn't like the song, and at first I didn't like it either. And the reason why it's so polarizing is because of that glitchy drum break that happens in the middle, that's like ba 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 ba, and the melody it transitions into. But to me, that drumming, I think, is really cool to the song. Like, I think Omar Ayman does a really good job, takes a lot of precision and stamina in this particular drumming thing, and the fact that it does repeatedly and with precision is just amazing. And the first part of this song has that bright melodic riffs, and the second part is much darker, and it reflects sort of like the contrast of your emotion, especially when you're in love. There's a dark side and there's a bright side to it, and that's why I think Good to Know really reflects that breakdown well. I would love to sit inside your mind, I would love to see what I find, cause truth and love will perish and rot in time. Like, you see that Good to Know is also beautifully written. Like, it sounds like a romantic love song that's cheesy, but then at the same time it acknowledges how ephemeral and mortal everything is, and nothing lasts forever. Also, I just might want to add that Sasha Ninkan and Shuzna again does a wonderful job in the vocals in this to add another layer of anthemic orchestra to it. Like, it's a huge play, a theatrical performance. The track Good to Know was, I think, the final part of this album that really stays coherent within the theme that they were going for. I think Good to Know is actually a really cool summary of what's been going on so far. This song, both about the dark truths of the modern world or the extreme emotions of love. But when Tekesima starts, the eponymous track, it starts to fall slightly below the standard I was expecting from Lust. Like, Tekesima is cool in theme, even though musically it's not very intriguing or exhilarating. It's a bit too slow for me. It builds up to a climax too long, and the climax, when it happens, just lasts for 3 seconds, and it doesn't really do anything to impact me emotionally. But the themes have a lot of cool references to it. For example, the track mentions Lina Grace, like a musical artist apparently that makes music for meditation and sleep hypnosis for veterans in the military who has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And Tekesima sort of represents that because it's, you know, very claustrophobic. It's about not being able to escape your sorrows. You have that feeling of a crazed, rambling person is singing this song and isn't able to get out of that corner in which he's stuck in. It's represented in the lyrics and represented, I think, musically halfway there. So, not musically interesting, but theme-wise, very intriguing. Next is introspective. In comparison to all of the other tracks with surreal lyricism or, sudden changes in passages or production or instrumentation or genres, introspective in comparison is pretty bland and inoffensive. It's not a bad song, it just doesn't have anything in it that really stands out to me. There's nothing much that's noteworthy about it. And I want to talk about that per se. Like, I think in an album, not every song has to be interesting, but at least the uninteresting songs have to be a sort of bridge or a transition to the next song to add to the overall mood. Introspective does none of that. It's very inoffensive, very bland. Final track, Heartwarmer, is another track that borders on alright, but it quickly redeems itself with this joyful square dance rhythm to it. It's very fun. It's a very fun conclusion to the whole album, and it converges virtuality and romance, like with lyrics such as, "Let's prove our love through digital reminders. Will we remember all the galleries we gathered?" So, those are the tracks. What's my verdict? Will we remember all the galleries we gathered? Last asked in the last song, Heartwarmer. Well, gallery-wise, in terms of the album, there are a lot of memorable cuts in Tekesima that is definitely worth checking out. I think Tekesima is Lust finding their own solid identity, a more transparent direction through many themes. Like the album itself, you explore themes of hedonism, love, admiration, digital dystopia, and they find themselves through that storytelling, through those lyrics. And I love that the arrangements and the instrumentations are exciting for the most part. But you see, in albums like this, like especially one that tries to achieve for a concept, it's either all the songs have to be equal in its emotional impact, or even the interludes or the underwhelming tracks are meant to elevate or add to the overall atmosphere of the album. I think Lust hasn't quite mastered that yet. I think there is some inconsistency in the way in which they arrange the track. Like all art galleries, some artwork just fade into wallpaper. That being said, Lust is amazingly visual in your songwriting. I think there are a lot of very intriguing and exhilarating arrangements in Tekesima, and it's definitely an album worth investigating, worth scrutinizing, and that's why I'm giving this album a 4.5 out of 5. Have you guys heard Tekesima by Lust? If you have not yet, I don't know why. You have no reason to. It's available on Spotify. If you have any comments or disagreements with me or my reviews, you can talk about it in the YouTube comment section, or you can follow us on social media at ATRMag42 on Twitter and Facebook, or Awful Track Record on Instagram. My name is Zim Ahmadi, Peminat Music 3 Budak Baru Belajar. I'll see you next episode.